Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. My name is Nicholas, and in the following video, this is going to be a very broad, comprehensive, step-by-step process of how to figure out how many calories you need based upon if you want to lose weight or if you want to even gain weight, maybe build some muscle, or if you simply just want to maintain your weight. So don't go anywhere. If this sounds like something you're interested in, then you are in the right place. Hey everybody, thank you for tuning into my video today. My name is Nicholas, and if you clicked on this video, you're probably a little lost when it comes to your exercise-related goals, whether that be muscle growth, fat loss, or simply even just weight maintenance. And the industry doesn't help, right? We have tons of products out there, products, services, programs, dietary supplements that all promise us results. And a lot of the times the promises are not so realistic and maybe even a little deceptive. And with the saturation of the industry itself and with all the information that's out there, it can become really frustrating and confusing for you as a consumer to try to sift through all these things and decide for yourself, hey, what's actually relevant, or what's the best way to go about achieving my goal. So I'm here to help. The goal that I have for this video is very simple. I want to provide a big picture, more comprehensive understanding of the actual requirements of course, fat loss and muscle growth, or simply even just weight maintenance. And I want to do so in a way that provides you the necessary tools and information so that you can make informed and educated decisions without falling victim to all of the false and deceptive advertising out there in the industry. So to provide you with an outline of my video, I'm first going to start by going over a few definitions that I will be referring to frequently throughout this video. I'm then going to move on to talking about a few tools that you're going to need to get started and to use during this process. After that, I'm going to go into an example calculation of how you're going to figure out your caloric intake and how to look at nutrition fact labels, how to read them, and how to incorporate them into your diet. And then towards the end, I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can assess your progress, and then some final notes that I think are really important for the consumer when going through this process. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, right before I get into definitions, I do want to say that this process is going to be trial and error. Now, there's a lot of people out there who want fast results, they want quick fixes, and they just want a shortcut to achieving their goals. And the sad truth is, there's not really a shortcut. That's kind of a marketing theme that companies use to try to appeal to people, to say, hey, there's a quicker way to do this. There's a cheat sheet, and really there's not. And this process is going to take a lot of trial and error and consistency. So let me move on to the definitions I'm going to be using throughout this video. Now, the first definition I want to talk about is called maintenance level. Its synonym is also TDEE, which stands for Total Daily Energy Expenditure. Now, it's very simple. Maintenance level is kind of a fancy way to put it. It's simply the amount of calories that your body requires every single day to maintain your current weight. Or it's simply the cumulative amount of calories that you burn off in a day and that your body requires. Now, the next definition is a caloric surplus. What is a caloric surplus? A caloric surplus is simply consuming a certain amount of calories above your maintenance level. So as an example, if I was consuming 2,700 calories and that was the amount of calories that I require per day, then an example surplus would be 3,000 calories. So that would be 300 calories above my maintenance level of 2,700 calories. And the next definition is a caloric deficit. Now, a deficit is the opposite of a surplus, and it is simply consuming a certain amount of calories less than your maintenance level. So as another example, if I was consuming 2,500 calories and that was my maintenance level, then an example deficit would be 500 calories below my maintenance level, which would be 2,000 calories. So next, let's talk about macronutrients. Now, the four main macronutrients would be protein, carbohydrates, fats, and alcohol. We're going to need to know a little bit of numbers associated with these macronutrients for our calculation in a little bit. So protein has 4 calories per gram, carbohydrates also have 4 calories per gram, fat has 9 calories per gram, and alcohol has 7 calories per gram. And for the purpose of this video, I'm just going to go over proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. Now next, what I want to talk about is a few tools that are needed to get started. Now, there are tons of formulas and ways to calculate your estimated caloric intake out there. Some of them are more accurate than others, but the important thing to understand is a lot of these calculators will simply give you a ballpark estimate or a number to start with. And that's what we want to focus on. It's simply a number to start with, and it's not meant to be totally accurate. And that's fine. So there are a couple different ways or a couple different calculators you can use. You can simply do your body weight times 15, or I did include a couple calorie calculators down below, and so you can use those as well. And generally you just input things like your height, your weight, your gender, your activity level, and it spits out a number. Now I'll come back to that calorie calculator in just a second. 3 other tools that I recommend utilizing during this process is a body weight scale, a kitchen scale, and a calorie tracking app. Now, you might think, oh my gosh, I need all these things to get started. It's going to be so expensive. Really? It's not. So if you were to simply just go to the store or even just search on Amazon, you could find a decent body weight scale for about $17. Kitchen scale you can get as cheap as about $10, and calorie tracking apps are generally free. The investment total comes out to about $30, and it's really not a huge investment. And with the calorie tracking apps, there are tons out there, and most of them are free. A couple that I can think of off the top of my head would be MyFitnessPal, Fat Secrets, Livestrong MyPlate, and there are tons of others. So pick your favorites. Just go to the App Store, either on Android or Apple. Now, the next thing I want to go into is an example calculation, and I want to refer back to that calorie calculator we talked about earlier. So let's say that you entered your information in that calorie calculator and it spit out a number. Let's say it spits out 2,400 calories, and you see the number, you're like, great, what do I do with this number? Totally understandable, and that's where I'm here to help. So the next step is figuring out how many of each macronutrient we need that's going to make up that total of 2,400 calories. Now let's start with the macronutrient fat. Now fat should typically be anywhere from about 20 to 30% of total daily calories. So let's go ahead and just meet in the middle with 25%. So if you took 25% of 2,400, you get 600 calories. So that's telling you, okay, 600 calories are going to come from fat. And now all we need to do is convert that into grams so we know how many grams of fat we need to consume. So, like I mentioned earlier, fat has 9 calories per gram. So you just divide 600 by 9 and you get 67 grams of fat. So next up, let's talk about protein. Now, the International Society for Sports Nutrition for years now has recommended that protein intakes are adequate at around 1.4 to 2 grams per kilogram of body weight. Now, further research into the subject has come to the conclusion that about 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kilogram is more accurate and acceptable, especially for populations who are a little bit more active. Now, for this example, I'm going to use 2.2 grams per kilogram, which is an even 1 gram per pound of body weight. So to make it very simple, let's say our example individual weighs 150 pounds, and so we would aim for 150 grams of protein, and by multiplying that by 4, we get 600 calories. So now we know that 600 calories are coming from fat, 600 calories are coming from protein, Add those two together, and that's 1,200 calories. Now, if our goal maintenance is 2,400 calories, we already have 1,200 calories figured out from both protein and fat. We simply subtract those two numbers and we get 1,200 calories. And that number is the remaining amount of calories that should be coming from carbohydrates. Now, what do we do with that number? Well, if you remember earlier, carbohydrates have 4 calories per gram. So we simply divide 1,200 by 4 and we get 300 grams of carbohydrates. So in this example, if you're an individual who weighs 150 pounds and you got that number of 2,400 calories to consume, those 2,400 calories would come from 67 grams of fat, 150 grams of protein, and 300 grams of carbohydrates. And now that we have those numbers for our example calculation, we now need to talk about how we're actually going to track those numbers. So let's move on to nutrition labels. Now next, we're going to talk about nutrition labels, how to read them, and how to incorporate them into our daily intake. Now, a lot of people tend to get a little confused with both nutrition labels and ingredients lists. So this is what a standard nutrition label looks like. And next up, this is what an ingredients list looks like. Now, we're going to be concerned for tracking purposes with the nutrition label. So if we were to look at an example nutrition label, the first thing that we see way up top above calories would be serving size. Now, this is really important, and it's a measurement that is often neglected by people when looking at the nutrition facts. Now, as an example, common serving sizes would be 1 ounce, sometimes in parentheses it would say 28 grams, or for pasta it's commonly 56 grams, which is 2 ounces, and those are just 2 examples. Now, to look at an example nutrition label, the one they have on the screen is for a sandwich. Now, you can see in parentheses that it says 1 sandwich and then 300 grams, which is the total weight of the sandwich. Now, if you look at calories, you see that it has 310 calories, 11 grams of fat, 36 grams of carbohydrates, and 17 grams of protein. Now, to do this calculation, just to ensure that the macronutrients actually add up to the total amount of calories, you would simply multiply 11 by 9 because fat has 9 calories per gram. You would multiply 36 by 4 because carbohydrates have 4 calories per gram. And then you would multiply 17 by 4 because protein also has 4 calories per gram. And you get the total number, which is 311, and of course it's rounded. Now, a quick note is, what if we don't eat the whole sandwich, right? What if we only eat half of it? So we only eat 150 grams of the sandwich instead of the full 300 grams. Well, I'll get to that in a little bit, but you would simply just do half of a serving if the serving size is 300 grams, and your calorie tracker will adjust it accordingly. Now, I do want to talk about some atypical nutrition labels that are actually becoming a little bit more common. And when people read them, they are usually confused because the numbers don't quite add up. And these are products with fiber and sugar alcohols. Now, you've probably heard of, net carbs and a lot of products having, only 4 grams net carbs, and people are like, okay, what are net carbs and what are carbohydrates? So to clear that up a little bit for you, net carbs simply means total carbs minus fiber. Now, because fiber doesn't completely digest, and it also does not have a major impact on blood sugar levels, we're going to go ahead and subtract that from the total amount of carbohydrates. And for sugar alcohols, about half of the amount of sugar alcohols is actually digested. So we're going to go ahead and cut that number in half and keep track of those calories. Now, to give you an example of this, just so you know what it looks like, I'm going to throw in a label that has both fiber and sugar alcohol. Now, if you look at the number of calories, it's 175 calories. However, if you add up each individual macronutrient, it comes out to about 195 calories. And that can be confusing for people. They could look at it and say, oh, this is actually not accurate. Now, if you look closer at the label, you'll see that it does have 8 grams of fiber and 4 grams of sugar alcohol. Now, because the product has 33 grams of carbohydrates, we could subtract 8 grams of fiber from 33 grams of carbohydrates, and we get 25 grams. Now we also have 4 grams of sugar alcohol to worry about. Now, like I said earlier, half of the sugar alcohol in a product is typically digested. So we want to cut 4 grams in half, which is 2 grams, and then factor that into the total carbohydrates. So if we subtract 2 from 25, we get 23 grams of carbohydrates. Now, if we add those numbers back up, we get 175. Now, I want to comment on how you are actually going to keep track of the calories. Now, for some products, especially if they're prepackaged and pre-made, some of them will have the nutrition facts right on them, and you won't even have to do any weighing or much calculating. For other products, such as whole foods, this is where your kitchen scale comes in. So if we were to just use a chicken breast as just a random example, the nutrition facts for a 4-ounce boneless, skinless chicken breast is typically around 100 calories, 21 grams of protein, and maybe 1 gram of fat. Now, if you were to, of course, prepare chicken, let's say you weighed it and it was 12 ounces instead of 4 ounces. Very simple. So you would go into your calorie tracker app, you would simply scroll up to 3 servings because, again, the serving size is 4 ounces and you're having 12 ounces, thus coming out to 3 servings, and you would track accordingly. So the next thing I want to talk about is how to assess our progress and how we're knowing if we're going in the right direction to achieve our goals. Now, you have all this information, all these great tools and resources, but of course it's important to know how to interpret it. So what I want to do now is talk about the body weight scale. Now, a body weight scale, it's your friend. It's not your enemy. And more importantly, it's a tool. And there are other tools of measurement you can use. You can look in the mirror, you can take pictures week to week, you can even take circumference measurements. So there are a lot of ways to assess your progress. But what we want to do is use the body weight scale as a means to track weekly trends. Now, the point in time every day that we want to weigh ourselves is every morning on an empty stomach after you use the restroom. Now, any other time of day, you're going to chance your weight being a little bit more inaccurate because of the state of digestion, your hydration levels, your sodium intake, and the waste that is currently in your body. These are several variables that are going to contribute to the number that you're going to read on the scale, and doing so first thing in the morning on an empty stomach is going to ensure that you have the most accurate number that you can possibly have. Now, most calorie tracking apps also give you the ability to track your weight on a daily basis. Now, what you will simply do is weigh yourself every morning on an empty stomach and record your weight. Now, it's important to note that your weight is going to fluctuate. No matter what goal you are going for, if it's, you're gaining weight or you're even losing weight, your weight is going to go up and down regardless. And the day-to-day fluctuations are not what's important, and they are nothing to be concerned about. What we are concerned about is the daily trends of weight from week to week. Now, what our goal is to have for numbers is weekly averages. Now, by weighing ourselves every morning on an empty stomach, we're going to add up all 7 numbers, divide by 7, and get the average for that week. So let's say we start week 1, we add all those numbers up, divide by 7, now we have week 1's average weight. Now we're going to do it again for about 3 to 4 more weeks. And as soon as we have all those weekly averages, we're going to have a nice graph that we can look at to determine what our weight is doing from week to week in relation to how many calories we're consuming. Now back to that example calculation. So let's say we're consuming 2,400 calories every single day for about 3 to 4 weeks. We take our weekly averages of our weight and we compare them week 1, week 2, week 3, and even week 4. And we look at this graph and we see kind of how our weight is trending. Now let's say we have the goal of gaining weight as opposed to losing it, and we see that our weight starts to decrease. So what that tells us is we're obviously not consuming enough calories to make that weight gain happen. So now we want to make a little adjustment. So let's say we're consuming 2,400 calories, let's bump it up to 2,600, and let's consume that for a few weeks and now see how our weight responds. If your weight stays consistent for a certain number of weeks, about 3 to 4, then it's safe to assume that, hey, you've probably found your maintenance level. Now, if you want to go into a surplus, just simply increase it by a modest 250 calories and now consume that for another 3 to 4 weeks and see how your weight responds. Now, an example deficit calculation. Let's say we're consuming 2,400 calories on a weekly basis. We analyze that 3 to 4 weeks and we see that our weight is actually staying the same. No worries, we found our maintenance level, so now we want to go ahead and decrease it by about 400 to 500 calories and consume that amount of calories for another 3 to 4 weeks and see how our weight responds. Now, it's important to note here a little bit about rate of weight loss and realistic expectations. Now, if you're an individual who is engaging in an exercise program and you want to lose fat, but you're also looking to preserve the muscle that you currently have, for most people, most of the time, you want to aim to lose about 0.5 to 2 pounds per week. Now, the more fat that you have to lose, the higher end of that range you want to be at. The leaner you are, the lower end of that range you would want to be at. Now, losing weight any quicker than that is going to put you at a higher chance of potential muscle loss, and any lower than that is going to make your goals very difficult and longer to achieve. Now, I commented on rate of weight loss. Now let me comment on rate of weight gain. So those who are looking to gain weight are typically looking to build muscle. Now, a lot of people have unrealistic expectations of how quickly muscle growth can actually happen. Now, there are a few categories of people who can typically gain muscle quicker than the average population. Those 4 categories of people include people who are gaining lost muscle, beginners, primarily those with a lot of fat to lose. Steroid users are another category who can do this, of course, at an accelerated rate. And a 4th category are those genetically gifted outliers, people who have amazing genetics and who don't respond the same as the average population when it comes to fitness-related goals. Now, if you are in one of these 4 categories of people, the chances are you can do what's called body recomposition, which means simply losing fat and building muscle at the same time. Now, there's a huge asterisk on there because, yes, people of these categories will be able to do this temporarily. However, there is a certain point where you're going to be human again, and like with the general population, you will need to be in either a caloric deficit or a surplus to lose or gain depending on your specific goal. Now, for rate of weight gain for those looking to gain muscle, we're going to keep it around 0.5 to 1 pound per week. Now, you may be saying, oh my gosh, that is super slow, and how am I going to meet my goals? Well, you need to be realistic. A lot of people think that you can gain muscle super quick, and the majority of people, the majority of the time, can't really do that. Most males, in the best of circumstances, can only gain about 12 to 15 pounds of muscle in a year, and that is if they are typically beginners or intermediates. Now, the average male can expect to gain about 30 to 50 pounds of muscle in his lifetime, and a female can expect to gain about half that at about 15 to 25. Now, a realistic expectation to have with our goal of muscle growth. For men, it's about 0.25 pounds per week, or about 1 pound per month, and that is the best of circumstances. For females, it's going to be about half of that. Now, I say this because muscle growth is a painfully slow process. A lot of people think that it's quicker than that, and they see all these testimonials and all these people talking about, oh my gosh, I gained this much in this amount of time. But what people fail to realize is that a lot of those testimonials are from people who are in one of those 4 categories of people. So either they are somebody who are regaining lost muscle, they had a substantial amount at one time, they lost it and now they're gaining it back, or maybe they are a true beginner and they have a lot of fat to lose. Therefore, the process of accumulating muscle and losing fat happened a lot quicker in the beginning. Now again, this is going to happen for people in those 4 categories. However, for the general population, most of the time, it's not realistic to expect that high of a rate of gain or loss. So with all that being said, your rate of weight gain should be anywhere from ½ pound to 1 pound per week, or 2 to 4 pounds per month. I now want to go over some final notes or things that I think are important to mention before I end this video. The first element of importance with consistency is our caloric intake. So I mentioned earlier that you would be consuming a set amount of calories every single day and recording your weight to see what your weight is doing in relation to the number of calories that you're consuming. However, there's also another side of that calculation. That is the caloric intake portion, and now there is the caloric expenditure portion. Now, what I mean by that is we want to ensure that our energy expenditure is also fairly consistent from week to week. And the reason we want to do this is because if we consume a set amount of calories, however, our energy intake is also not at that level and it either goes way up or goes way down, then because those two are not meeting, we're going to have to recalculate and reassess, and it's going to take even longer to determine how many calories we need and to thus meet our goals. And what I simply mean by this is just try to keep your activity consistent from week to week. If you consistently go to the gym 3 times a week, keep it consistent. Don't go 3 times one week and then 6 times another week and expect your caloric intake and demands to be the same, because they're not going to be. If you were to run a marathon one week and be completely sedentary the next week, then your caloric requirements are going to be way different. So the understanding and the theme is to not only keep your energy intake consistent, but to also keep your activity consistent from week to week as well throughout this process. Another note I want to touch upon is when to make adjustments. Now, there are going to be certain points where your metabolism is going to adapt to your new body weight and of course the calories that you're consuming. So if you were to lose a number of pounds, let's say you lost about 5 pounds, and that's great. And let's say you've come to a plateau with your weight, so it's constantly staying the same from week to week. Now, a lot of people get scared once their weight stops moving in a certain direction. They're being consistent, they are getting the results they want, and they come to a halt. Their weight maybe tends to stay the same, and they wonder, oh my gosh, what am I doing wrong? And you're not doing anything wrong. If you do come to a point where your weight is static, then you simply just need to make another calorie adjustment. So either you need to start expending more calories if your goal is to lose weight, or you need to decrease your caloric intake. And of course, if your goal is to instead gain weight, then you simply either need to consume more or decrease your energy activity. Now, it's important to note also that good foods and bad foods don't really exist. There are more nutritionally dense, higher quality foods, and there are less nutritionally dense, lower quality foods, typically that are more processed. Now, you do not have to consume all of your calories from one or the other, but you do want to find a nice balance. A typical rule of thumb is to consume about 85% of your diet from higher quality, nutrient-dense foods, of course, that have enough vitamins and minerals in them, and about that other 15% can provide you a little wiggle room to, of course, enjoy those foods that you wouldn't typically enjoy on a consistent basis. Now, typically, a lot of people who start tracking their calories tend to become very rigid during this process. Now, it's important to stay consistent and to stay as accurate as possible. However, there is a certain degree of rigidity that's not going to make this a very enjoyable experience, and it could cause a lot of headache. Now, my first comment on that is, one, you don't have to do this the rest of your life. Calorie counting is not for everybody, and it's not something that should be engaged in for a long term for majority of people. It's simply a fundamental process of learning nutritional values of certain foods in certain amounts so that you can then eventually graduate away from having to use a scale and be able to better analyze the nutritional calculations of various food groups. Once you have the necessary education with caloric values of foods and knowing how much of this kind of food has this many calories, then you can start making more informed and educated decisions that are related to your energy intake every day as well as your goals. And it's also very important to comment on flexibility. Now, if there's a holiday gathering coming up, by all means, enjoy that time with friends and family. Don't be obsessive and worry about calories on those occasions. It's only one occasion and it's not going to make or break your progress. There are also other strategies that you can implement, such as diet breaks, refeeds, or even cheat meals that I'll definitely go over in additional videos. A final question that I get asked and that some of you are probably wondering is the question of, do I have to track my calories in order to lose or gain weight? And the answer is no. You do not have to absolutely track your calories to lose or gain any amount of weight. However, I will say that by not doing so and by not understanding nutritional values and how weight loss or gain happens, it's going to make it a little bit more difficult to achieve your goals, and it's probably going to drag out the process. By this point in the video, I'm sure that you can see why going through this process of figuring out your caloric intake and making adjustments is the best, fastest, and most efficient way to go about your exercise-related goals. No, it is not for everyone, and it is not something that needs to be done long-term. However, I think it is necessary as a fundamental learning experience and understanding for how to go about your fitness-related goals and how to make adjustments on them accordingly. And please, if you would be so kind as to leave me feedback and tell me about topics or videos that you would like me to make, and that way I can get a better idea for what my audience wants and then make content on it accordingly. So there we have it. I really do hope that this video was helpful and that it provided you a more comprehensive understanding of calories and how they relate to weight loss, weight gain, or simply even weight maintenance. And I really, really hope that this can become a resource and these tools you can put in place to use to your advantage to achieve your exercise-related goals. So again, thanks for tuning in. Let me know if you have any questions, and please provide feedback if you would like to see other videos or what topics you'd like to hear about in the future. Thanks again, and have a great rest of your day.